us a desire for you. We are hardwired to love you. And St. Thomas Aquinas wrote beautifully how we are created solely to worship and to love God. And as of late, our Holy Father John Paul II wrote beautifully as well on how man yearns for the transcendental. Now fast forward to the Atheist Convention, those of you that were there, and this great doctor, Dr. Anderson Thompson, and I like this guy, I talked to him afterwards, he was brilliant. He was showing, neurologically speaking, how we have constructs, psychological constructs, that parallel religious constructs. And he said, neurologically speaking, we can show from Darwin, we got nurturing. We have the capacity to look beyond, the desire to look towards God. We Catholics like to think the saints keep up with what we're doing. And I know it feeds into y'all's illusions that we're kind of dreaming about heaven and everything, but this is what we do. I can picture St. Augustine and St. Aquinas up in heaven saying, look, this guy's proven what we said centuries ago. Man is hardwired to love God. Neurologically speaking, this is proving what we've been saying for centuries, that man was created, built in, natural, part of us, hardwired, our brains. So naturally, neurologically speaking, the test should show that. But yet, Dr. Thompson, with all due respect, came up with this conclusion. He said, therefore, because we can prove scientifically, neurologically, that man does act religiously, therefore religion has hijacked religion. I say no. It's much more reasonable to say that science is proving what we've said all along, that man is created and hardwired to love, serve God and one another. The next one is this is very sad, and I only bring this up because I think it proves the point. We've all been afflicted by knowing someone who has committed suicide, and there's nothing sadder to think about. But I only bring it up reluctantly to think about it from our perspective tonight. I submit that it makes absolutely no sense if we're merely the product of natural selection. If matter produced us, why would one person take their life? It makes no sense. And what about the people that try to take their life and they're saved, thank God, through medicine, and they live a happy life? If they were destined to take their life through Darwinian natural selection, if science predisposed them to remove themselves from the existence of the earth, why would they not keep repeating it time and time again until, God forbid, they ultimately did? And again, I only bring that up reluctantly, but if you think about these realities, on a lighter note, let's end this discussion on a lighter note, human freedom. I submit human freedom makes no sense from an atheist or a materialistic point of view. We all have free will. Ed has free will. When he gets up here, he can decide how he wants to act. It's not predetermined. Man can choose their own destiny. Man can create opportunities. Man can exercise free will. And lastly, you can go through any other aspect of human condition. And I submit, you could take anything. Take reality TV, some of the stupid reality TV. Actually, Ed, I'll give you this one. But if you look at some of the base reality TV, I submit that that can't be the natural product of science alone. Not even Darwinian natural selection can produce something that stupid. But I summarize this point that when you look at things existentially, and again, I don't have time to do it, but I submit time and time again, if you look at human experience, if you look at what we know, if you look at how we experience reality, the Catholic position, the Catholic point of view, much more reasonably explains that human phenomena than does atheism. And very briefly, I will wrap up on science. Thirdly, I submit, even scientifically, it makes more sense. It's more reasonable to go with the Catholic view. I don't want to take up too much time, but there were 3 points in the history of time in which we need to assess whether or not it makes sense to believe in God. First, the Big Bang. It may surprise you that a Jesuit, a Catholic Jesuit, is the one who came up with the Big Bang. First of all, we go from nothing to something. I ask any of you here to give us another parallel when we have something come from nothing. This in itself was one of the most extraordinary events, making it highly unlikely it came from chance alone. Second, within nanoseconds after the Big Bang, we've seen that the universe was finely tuned perfectly. Everything had to come into order just perfectly. As one scientist, Peter Schuster, said, it was a very, very narrow corridor. Everything had to come into place. Scientists will say, we needed carbon. The chances of carbon coming into place were very unlikely. We needed stars. The chances that the stars would align were very unlikely. And even further still, we needed big stars, small stars. We needed every bit of physical and matter all to come together perfectly. How astronomical was it? Let's get visual with this. The astrophysicist Hugh Ross suggested an example. He said, let's stack up quarters across the United States, from the United States all the way to the moon, and let's do it for 1 billion other planets. And then he said, have her blindfold herself and put a red quarter in one of those stacks. Then make her pick a quarter at random. The chances that she would pick a red quarter randomly with all these billion of planets were so incredible. That's what we're talking about. Those are the odds that had to take place for the universe to come about. Now that's a big number. One scientist said the odds were about 1 in 10 to the 40th power. 1 in 10 to the 40th power. Now that's a huge number. Not even Al Gore can invent a number that big. The third instant, which is even more incredible still, we went from non-life to life. According to the atheist and the prevalent scientific view, 2.5 billion years ago, the earth was filled with non-living matter. Then matter suddenly went poof into existence. The chances of this happening, again, were so minute. One physicist said that even the first cell, which we originally thought was very simple, was quite complex. We now know, science tells us, that the first cell was like a more complicated machine than anything modern science can produce. Again, the chances that this stage, non-life to life, was the likelihood from an inanimate matter of one number with 40,000 zeros after it. Now let's put all this in perspective. I'm not saying numbers prove God, but I am saying tonight we got two choices: God or no God. As Monsignor Marin, the pastor of this parish, told me, Charles, keep it simple. We believe in God, they don't. And at this point, it is that simple. We believe in God, and the atheists don't. And I submit, the atheists have to say, everything had to work just perfectly. They had to beat such astronomical odds. From my humble perspective, and again, I'm not a scientist, but I thought science was about probability and likelihood. But to take the scientific approach, you have to say, reality came about in the most unlikely, in the most random, in the most improbable way imaginable, defying all odds. From our point of view, that's just not reasonable. So in conclusion, when you consider all of the evidence, I want you to consider everything. Consider, philosophically speaking, existential realities of the human condition, and then also the scientific evidence. I'm confident you'll believe that the Catholic position is the more reasonable position. Thank you.
We're not allowed to get into rebuttal yet, but I will have to say that I have to jump ship just a tiny bit and tell you that there's really no doubt, none whatever, that reality TV is a Catholic conspiracy. That's wrong. Okay? And this is easily proven. We'll get back to that later. As I said earlier, the two things that I wanted to talk to you about, and the 2 points that I want to make that I think will make it clear, especially when I get to rebutting some of the wonderful things Charles told us. The two things that will make it clear that an atheist point of view is a much more reasonable point of view than a Catholic one. Disobedience and Haiti. And I want to talk very briefly about both of them first in case I don't get time to finish up. I don't know how tight our timekeeping is going on over here. But briefly, disobedience, and this is an important part of every religious tradition or theology that I know of, and certainly is an important part of Catholicism. It certainly says in the Catechism to be disobedient is a sin and a difficult thing. But there is a very, very serious problem with this whole idea that we shouldn't be disobedient. And that is the ongoing and unsolvable problem of deciding who or what it is that we need to be obedient to. If, in fact, I am convinced that there is this God that Charles is happy with and that many of you are happy with, and if I'm convinced that he or she or it has the characteristics that you say it does, then of course, you know, if there is an all-powerful God who's behind it all and taking care of everything, then being obedient to that God probably does make sense. But you got to start with convincing me that there's such a God to believe with. You can't start with, okay, you have to believe, you have to do what God says. Because first I got to hear that God said anything, which I haven't heard yet. And I'm going to get back to that in considerable more detail. Let's talk about Haiti. It's fresh on all our minds. It's a painful subject. Before we get to the painful part, I would like to do something that I have a feeling I'll be able to get the Catholics on my side as well as I can get the atheists and freethinkers on my side. I want to pick on somebody that I don't think any of you have. I don't know, it might be one or two people in this audience who have some respect for Pat Robertson, but I'm guessing that I can get you on my side pretty quickly and easily with a little disquisition regarding Mr. Robertson. And Charles was saying before our debate that he was so glad that I couldn't pin Pat Robertson on him. And he's right. I would never blame Charles or the Catholic Church for the fulminations of Pat Robertson. But I wanted to read you something that I didn't write. It was written by a woman named Lily Coyle of Minneapolis. This is a letter. First of all, I assume everybody knows that Pat Robertson came out on his 700 Club with this idiotic statement about Haiti, and the reason the earthquake happened was that there had been this pact with Satan many years ago in order to help overthrow the French, and that was the reason they had been cursed with all of these problems for so many years, of course ending with the terrible earthquake last week. So this is a letter from Satan to Pat Robertson. Dear Pat Robertson, I know that you know that all press is good press, so I appreciate the shout out. And you make God look like a big mean bully who kicks people when they're down, so I'm all over that action. But when you say that Haiti has made a pact with me, it is totally humiliating. I may be evil incarnate, but I'm no welcher. The way you put it, making a deal with me leaves folks desperate and impoverished. Sure, in the afterlife, but when I strike bargains with people, they first get something here on earth. Glamour, beauty, talent, wealth, fame, glory, a golden fiddle. Those Haitians have nothing, and I mean nothing. And that was before the earthquake. Haven't you seen Crossroads or Damn Yankees? If I had a thing going with Haiti, there'd be lots of banks, skyscrapers, SUVs, exclusive nightclubs, Botox, that kind of thing. An 80% poverty rate is so not my style. Nothing against it, I'm just saying not how I roll. You're doing great work, Pat, and I don't want to clip your wings. Just come on, you're making me look bad. And not the good kind of bad. Keep blaming God, that's working, but leave me out of it, please. Or we may need to renegotiate your own contract. Best, Satan. Now, it's easy to make fun of Pat Robertson, and I apologize for doing the easy thing, and especially in front of an audience that I know is going to agree with me on virtually all of it. And there are two main points I want to make about Haiti. One of them is obvious, and I know you'll see it coming, Charles, I'm sure.